welcome everybody to our session on the evaluation of the business contribution to the SDGs. My name is Wolfgang Meyer, and I will just try to get some insight to the discussion here. So this is the start of my presentation. It's just a short presentation, getting 3 questions into the discussion here. The first question I want to raise, the process of SDGs, of course, is certainly organized and initiated by the United Nations, and therefore it is addressed to nation states. So the whole reporting system is made by the nations, and it is the task of the national government to find some solutions how the SDG reporting should be organized. So the first question we have probably to discuss here, and of course it is a longer discussion, is how civil society and especially business is involved in this kind of reporting process. So it's not only about the SDGs on the national level, but especially on the reporting. And there's several different solutions, and it is quite interesting how business is involved in the procedures. So we have certainly at that moment, and this is coming to my second point, we have some information about this kind of reporting at some countries. So there's a voluntary national review every year at the higher level political fora, and this should, the first one at least, should include some information about this national SDG reporting system. So we had last year the first 22 of these reviews, and my colleagues and I from the EVAL SDG group had let's say a spot on this voluntary national reviews. And one finding is that there's a lot of information about the SDGs for sure, but there's at that point also some information about monitoring, but not very much about evaluation and how evaluation should be included in the procedure. And this is of course a very interesting point, because probably the national states did not have in the focus that there is something like evaluation, and it is important for that. So the question here is, how is evaluation included in national reporting systems? And it may be especially interesting to hear about this kind of discussions from Wendy about the Netherlands, because the Netherlands will have their review in about a month. So finally, I think this is a very special topic, and actually I did not read much about that, but probably Peter can tell us a lot about this. It is on the national SDG reporting on one hand side, but we have mostly merely transnational companies which are somehow involved in the SDG procedure. So the problem from the side of these transnational corporations is that they have probably to follow different kind of rules, settings, reporting systems, evaluation tasks from a lot of different countries, especially if it's really running around the world. We will have from the southern part of the world, we will have quite different aspects which should be reported than probably from in the States or in Europe. So the question here is, how does these transnational activities fit into this national organized SDG reporting system? So these are the 3 questions I want to raise, and for sure we will not be able to answer all these questions in that limited time. But I think it is quite interesting to hear first from the side of one of the people who is involved in the procedures from the national government. So I want to hand over to Wendy Asbeek Brusse from the Netherlands Ministry, and she probably is able to at least give us a hint about some of these questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Wolfgang. Yes, at your request, I've been looking into the consultation process in the Netherlands, and also especially looking at what is planned in the terms of monitoring and evaluation. And what I've seen is that, as you point out, in the Netherlands too, people have been very active in consulting and describing, especially what the SDG process is about. So I really recognize that. For instance, there was a little parliament around about autumn 2016, in which an entire implementation plan of the SDGs in the Netherlands was discussed, and also together with a big overview of already existing central government policies and how these had to be adapted to the SDGs. There was also what you could call some sort of benchmark published that based on the Dutch, or trying to assess what the Dutch starting position was vis-a-vis the SDGs, and that benchmark was based on different reports. An important report by the Independent Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, which is a big think tank on the environment. Also, the Bertelsmann Stiftung's country comparisons and the OECD's pilot study was used, and our independent statistics office, Statistics Netherlands, which has also played a big role in the statistical and M&E discussions previously, also made a report, and this allowed the government to sort of publish a benchmark that then is then seen as the starting point for the whole process in the Netherlands for moving towards the SDGs. In terms of the consultation process and going to the question of how is it arranged, I can say that the Netherlands really builds on its strengths to involve societal partners. That includes business and civil society. And I don't think it would be too far to say that business has actually been already from the start in 2012 quite active in trying to promote the SDGs. And business and civil society together have almost dragged in the government as well to become quite active in promoting the SDGs. So the element of societal consultation, which is emphasized in the SDGs, is very strongly available and around in the Netherlands in the whole consultation process, and there are lots of networks being quite active. There is a sort of light coordination role for the Minister for Foreign Trade and Development. She is the coordinator on behalf of the Cabinet, and is basically coordinating already existing plans and turning them into a sort of national implementation program. Now, if we look at the first voluntary report, that has come out very recently in May 2017, and this has been based on consultations and participations by, of course, central government, but also decentral government, civil society organizations, mostly NGOs involved in development cooperation, the business and financial sector, the knowledge institutions, and also youth organizations. And what all of these segments of society have done is that they have produced this voluntary report, and this has been the input for the annual so-called Parliamentary Accountability Day. So this is going to be an annual procedure, and this report, as Wolfgang already said, will also be presented to the high-level political forum of the UN in July 2017. The voluntary report contains a sort of joint story and then subsequent separate section by all of these contributors, so central, decentral government, civil society, business, and so on. Now, the joint story is basically welcoming the SDGs, also welcoming it as an opportunity for accelerated, comprehensive and coherent approach to the already existing Dutch agenda. And it says that, well, it gives a good opportunity for building a common vision for 2030. Now, if you look particularly at the role of business and civil society, as I already said, business and society have been very active from the start, already basically from 2012 onward, and transnational corporations, Dutch multinationals have been quite active. For instance, Unilever, AkzoNobel, Philips, DSM, KPMG, all of these Dutch-based multinationals have been very active in promoting the SDGs. And this has also resulted in cooperation networks with government and with civil society organizations and lots of initiatives at the level of networks. Now, if you look at the question of what are strengths and weaknesses, I would say that it's a strength that business and civil society have been involved in from the start and are also really keen on benchmarking. But there are, I think, and it's also a strength, I think, and it plays to Dutch sort of culture of polar modeling, or what you could call tripartite agreements and tripartite benchmarking, that these parties are constantly discussing the SDGs. And that can also play to the strength of the debate on climate change. But if you look at some of the weaknesses, I would say that much more attention is paid to monitoring than to actually evaluation for the long term. In the voluntary report, it is mentioned that evaluations will have to be produced in 2020 and in 2025 before the final evaluation report of 2030. But how and who is going to do that, how it's done and who are going to be involved in that is not really spelled out. So I think that still needs to be decided. And of course, the whole progress or the whole process still has to be decided upon in terms of how deep do you go into the evaluation, impact, attribution, etc. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done in deciding these sort of progresses. Another weakness, I think, that is that the SDG process is seen as a rather pragmatic process based on adapting already existing policy goals and initiatives with a light coordinating touch from the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation. But that approach also, I would say, risks a lack of ambition, urgency, and a clear sort of division of responsibilities of who is going to do what, also in the field of monitoring and evaluation. And so that you may then run into the risk that a lot of parties are doing a lot of things, but it stops basically at sort of performance indicators and presenting nice boxes to be ticked, but not really getting solid evaluation. And I would say another weakness could be is that Dutch evaluation policy is still very much bogged down into the logic of national governmental silos, with each ministry organizing its own evaluation policies and evaluations. And that would then not play to the global goals and the role of transnational and multinational corporations, who have to do a lot of the work as well. So there is still no clear, to sum it up, there is still no clear process to measure and evaluate the global and transnational impacts, nor is it really clear how business is going to be held accountable for its impact. There's a lot of voluntary agreements and a lot of references to performance indicators, but I think we really need to invest in harmonizing global reporting standards and also getting a clearer process there. So I suppose I would sort of stop here at my reflections on the Dutch process and then give the floor to Peter Hardi.
Thank you, Wendy. My name is Peter Hardi, and I'm Professor of Business Ethics and Corporate Social Responsibilities at the Central European University in Budapest. Just continuing the themes, I would like to speak about three issues. One is that why business needs to go beyond the present state of performance measurement and what is the rationale behind participating in monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of SDGs. And then I will speak about the challenges of this process. And finally, I will address the importance of a consultative process that might help all major participants, including the governmental, the civil society, and the business sectors of society. So the rationale, as we could also hear both from Wolfgang and Wendy, business, except with some of the exceptions, and I think the Dutch example is just one of the leading procedure also for business, but that's not the case for most of the international and national business entities. So they need to understand why they have to go beyond the existing measurement systems, performance measures particularly, and why it is important to measure the impact of their contribution, because it gives them, first of all, a feedback. And with this feedback, they can see that there are not only the intended outcomes and consequences of their business activities, but that are many unintended and sometimes even harmful consequences of their activities. And in certain cases, the actual business activities may go against the SDGs. And if they measure the impact, they have a tool to make strategy corrections. They may be able to better align their activities with the SDGs, and they may select more efficient solutions, more efficient use of resources, and a more efficient way to influence the development process. And also, through the impact measurements, their activities become more transparent, which means that they can themselves see better the internal issues. And of course, it's also important because society can see better what is the true impact of business activities. Now, it's easy to say, but much more difficult to actually do an impact measurement, particularly because there is still a great amount of ignorance concerning what is actually impact measurement. As Wendy mentioned, and it's very true, and I can see many examples, business likes to measure its own performance against its own benchmarks. So that is what we sometimes call box ticking, that yes, we fulfill this, yes, we achieve that, but what is the true impact on, for example, society, on the environment, or even on the economy in broader terms? That's unknown, because that you can do not with performance measurement, but only with impact measures. Now, sometimes there is a mixture of when they speak about measurement at companies, because they usually rely on existing and well-practiced tools, such as the Global Reporting Initiative, which is the #1 favorite reporting tool for multinational companies. But these are again based on the company's own reporting systems and almost 100% based on performance measurement and not on impact measurement. Now, of course, for the impact measurement, there is a problem, and one problem is the time shift, which means sometimes a significant delay between the actual activities and the measurable impact, which might be visible only after years of a company's activities. And we know that the CEO's time span is much shorter, particularly when in multinational companies you have a pressure from the investors and from the shareholders who do not really think about these long-term effects of the company's activities. And finally, I would mention among the challenges that in many cases, business simply rejects to be accountable for the impacts. And there are some reasonable points here, because the impact is always a multi-causal outcome. It is not a linear and not a singular event, so you cannot really tie one single business action to a single outcome and an input what that is finally, after many years, would appear in society. So there is the influence also of external factors, of others, so that makes the acceptance of impact measures even more difficult. Now, there is one way maybe that can help overcome these challenges, and among others, it's what we call a consultative process. And here we have to see three areas. The first one is the governmental level, how governments and business can go along and agree on the importance and even the methods of measurement and evaluation. Wendy made a point that companies are more often just monitoring instead of evaluating their activities. And here the role of the harmonization in national governmental bodies is very important. It's important both in setting up the databases and also agreeing on the evaluation methodologies, because if government follows a different methodology and business again a different methodology, then it's very, very difficult to compare and harmonize the evaluation process. And here I think our experience is that the role of the national statistical offices are very important, because they require companies to report many data that they use in the system of national reports, and through that kind of statistical basis, maybe a joint reporting system can be created and used for the monitoring and evaluation of the impact on sustainable development goals. The second level is the subnational level and business consultations. It's an even more difficult part. Maybe this is the crucial issue, because sometimes the impacts on the local level are more important than the aggregated impacts of companies. And here even the national process is sometimes just simply ignorant. And what local government can do, and particularly what the civil society organizations can do on the local level, that's a decisive issue. Here, again, joint local data collection can be one of the starting points, and that could lead a kind of consultative impact measurement issue, agreeing on what are the important issues that should be evaluated, because otherwise there might be too many data and too many issues, so then the real impacts on the local level would be lost. And finally, there is an importance how the business entities cooperate and consult among each other on the impact measurement or monitoring and evaluation of their activities concerning the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And here I think one important issue is to agree on international standards. This may be part of a voluntary framework, how to monitor and evaluate the impacts of transnationals. And an important issue here is that these entities should share their measurement and evaluation evaluation practices with their peers. And this knowledge sharing and methodology sharing could lead to a better harmonization on an international level, and that might also help the process of measuring and evaluating the impact on sustainable development goals. So this, with this, I give back the mic to Wolfgang, who will explain what will happen afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Wendy, for this interesting contribution and insights. Well, I just got the feeling that we have at least two very difficult challenges, both for business and for nation states and also for civil societies. The one thing I think, as Peter mentioned at the end, is, well, we have on one hand side harmonization, which means we need some kind of standards, international standards, or as Wendy mentioned, also standards which are probably across the different political sectors and the ministries, which is of course an issue at the national level. We have also probably to harmonize the activities between the different levels within the country, the regional level and the local level to the national level. So there's a lot of need to harmonize that, but on the other hand, of course, the SDGs also need some kind of specification and differentiation. So this is also a difficulty. So from my point of view, this is the main challenge, and we probably should discuss maybe in the next round about what kind of solutions are probably arising at the horizon, and if they can really be useful for business and also for the national policies. So Peter, you mentioned some international standards for business. Do you think this is also available or positively at least to link to the national policies? Let's go to a really good example, because it's one of the front runners in the Netherlands. So do you think these transnational standards and transnational activities are really good to link with the national policies in the Netherlands?
In a way, absolutely. The whole evaluation, monitoring and evaluation process of sustainable development at all started on a high-level international body at the UN, when after 1992 they started the process of identifying indicators and identifying methodologies how to measure the contribution to sustainable development. And that was based on an international consultative process. So I think that gave the example what the different governments can do. And when we speak about the responsibility of national governments, it doesn't mean that they have to do everything independently, particularly not in certain technical issues, which can be, and I think should be, harmonized. And these national governments should have a kind of similar system how to monitor and evaluate their contribution to the implementation of SDGs. And on the other side, business also needs some kind of harmonization, and there are certain efforts. I mentioned just one, the GRI, but there is also a collaboration between the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and GRI and Global Compact to elaborate a kind of navigator, for example, that helps companies to understand how to do the measurement and evaluation process. And actually what we, with the Global Value Project, tried to do was, again, a similar process. We tried to create a navigation tool, a toolkit that helps companies to select the best and most suitable format for measuring their impact. And here there is a very important issue, and that is focus. There are, we know, according to some experts, even too many SDGs, but if the SDGs are not that many, the actual targets associated with the SDGs are really very numerous. And there is even at the biggest transnational companies, there is simply no adequate resource to address all these issues. So they have to select the most important targets and that few SDGs where they can make the biggest impact on the development process. And they have to work on these indicators and on these issues to measure both their performance and their impact. I think that's why some international standards based on a voluntary cooperation of the companies are important. And then the next task would be how they can combine it, how they can harmonize it with the governmental international approaches. And that's a daunting task.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Wendy, well, maybe you can give us an insight. Well, you said that the transnational companies, especially in the Netherlands, are quite active and involved and supporting the SDG thing. So is it also true for what Peter mentioned here, this harmonization and standardization process and the measurement issues? Is there a strong discussion between state and business on this issue?
Well, I must confess that I haven't really seen any signs of there really being a strong discussion, because I have the feeling that the Dutch government and also companies are still very much focused on the goals themselves and not on issues of how are we going to harmonize the measurement or the implementation, and actually also harmonizing the evaluation process. Because if you look at the voluntary report, words like evaluation and especially monitoring are mentioned quite a lot, but it stops there. So I think we've only just started in the Netherlands to really realize that we do need some form of harmonization. And I think that in the Netherlands, Statistics Netherlands, the independent statistics office, is probably a very important linking pin, as Peter also said, in trying to sort of link national measurement and national statistical evidence to the international level. But I think even though the Netherlands has quite a strong culture of monitoring and evaluation, and even though with the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation we do have somebody coordinating this and also sort of used to thinking in terms of monitoring and evaluation, and even though Parliament is also aware of it, we haven't really started to think through what does it actually mean in terms of the nitty-gritty. And so that still needs to be done. What you do see, though, that is that there are various initiatives, both at the, I would say also at the European and international level. Peter mentioned a few, but of course, I don't know whether you mentioned it already, Peter, the EU's Global Value Toolkit. There is also very recently an initiative called the Gold Standard for the Global Goals, which sort of aims at activity certification and impact certification. So the idea being that on a voluntary basis, companies are going to get guidelines on how to measure the impact of their activities towards the goals, and they can actually get sort of certifications that they're doing it in the right way and in a harmonized and comparable way. So I think these are very interesting initiatives, but in terms of of how they are embraced, let's say in the Netherlands or by companies, I have a feeling, because I haven't read much, couldn't really find much about it, that we're only at the beginning of thinking about this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Peter, you want to add?
Yes, a couple of quick comments to Wendy's points. First of all, we haven't mentioned yet, but there is another obstacle here, and that's financing the monitoring and evaluation process. Very often we forgot about the resource need. And sometimes even large companies do not want to spend too much, and they don't allocate a kind of special budget line for measurement and evaluation. Sometimes even reporting is done on a very strict budget. And in this case, when we speak about a harmonized and internationally supported measurement and evaluation system, we have to understand that from the data collection up to the writing of the evaluation report, it all costs money. So companies have to understand it, as well as the national governments, that there is sometimes not even a cheap process. And I think that's another obstacle why some of the companies, even the biggest ones, do not want to take it very seriously. Now, another quick comment on some of these initiatives, particularly the certification, which might be a very good incentive, but as long as it is based on company self-reporting, it is always a little bit dubious. And on the other hand, if it is done by an independent body, then the question comes that, again, resources, human and financial resources, who will do that kind of evaluation and certification.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Maybe I can ask this final question, quickly hand it over to Wendy. Is there any ideas in the Netherlands about this issue?
About the, you mean about the money problem and the certification process? Yes,
exactly.
Well, I fully agree with Peter that the resources and budgets are really can be an obstacle, and are actually an obstacle in the process, and we already see it in the Netherlands, where after the crisis and still beyond the financial crisis, Statistics Netherlands, which plays quite a prominent role in gathering data, also working together with civil society and business. So Statistics Netherlands underwent budget cuts, and so really has to struggle to get the people together to play a prominent role in the SDG statistics. And of course, if that holds for the government, that also certainly holds for businesses, who also have a lot of other requirements. So I really recognize that as an obstacle, and I think there is a growing awareness in the Netherlands that, at least with people who are studying the SDGs, that the capacity requirements are quite immense, and we're not even talking, I mean, we're talking about a rich country like the Netherlands, comparatively rich, and we're not even then talking about development countries who also have other data collection obstacles. So that is certainly a major issue. With regard to the certification process, what I saw, and I thought that was very interesting, but I don't know how big the initiative is, but is that the gold standard for the global goals, this initiative, that it actually does stress the need for third-party verification of this whole certification process. And so it goes beyond the self-reporting and ticking the boxes by the companies themselves, and I think that could be very interesting, because it brings in the element of transparency and public scrutiny that Peter Hardi also mentioned is needed if you really want to go beyond the sort of rather voluntary self-reporting and performance measurements that companies do themselves. So I think these are interesting developments. I think also that the OECD and the EU should play a role in it. The OECD, of course, has its process with regard to development aid and the impact of development initiatives with OECD DAC. And I think the OECD could also play a role in sort of independent verification of the impact of various interventions and parties on the SDGs.
Fully agree.
Okay, thank you both. Well, let's move to this level of, let's say, international organizations which somehow are guiding the process. If you look at the monitoring issue, well, I have to see that Eurostat is very important, and there was a lot of activities even before, well, at the starting point of the SDG process, about thinking about how to monitor it. And there's a European monitoring system for SDGs even before the SDGs officially started, and we have already the first reports from Eurostat on the European level. So do you think that Eurostat and the European Union should play a leading role in Europe for having this kind of certification processes, and what we talked about of handing over standardization, harmonization of the procedures? So probably I ask this question first to Wendy, so that you can start to answer.
Well, I think Eurostat, of course, together with its network with the national statistics offices, is very well positioned, and as you mentioned, it has been in the forefront. So yes, but remembering also what Peter said about focus, and I would say focus not only for business, but probably also for international organizations, given the scarce resources that there are, and given all the capacity challenges, it may also be practical if bodies like Eurostat and OECD DAC and, let's say, certification initiatives like the gold standard for the global goals would actually sort of define what their strength is and define what their focus is. Now I can see Eurostat being a sort of overall body trying to keep an overview of what's going on in Europe, but let's say the OECD could play to its strengths by choosing those very important issues and indicators that it is best equipped to study because of its the themes that it usually already discusses and studies. And the same, of course, with the OECD DAC networks for everything to do with development in terms of social development and development cooperation. So I would say that there might be some sort of division of labor needed to make sure that things are done in an efficient way.
Yeah, I would add to this that helping focus, there is a role for the international development banks as well. They always wanted to measure the impact of the different projects that they financed. So all the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, or the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development might have an important role to find the focus and the harmonized measurement and evaluation systems in their own areas of expertise.
Hey, thank you, Peter, for adding that. So maybe I want to move on the other side, which is probably the most serious trouble we are in at the moment. So there seems to be an improved movement away from, let's say, global solidarity and solving the problems of the world and back to a national thinking. So of course, yes, everybody's thinking about the decision of the United States to quit the climate agreement. But this is also, you can also see that on some sides of companies who really want to get rid of this process. On the other hand, the SDG process is of course depending on voluntary activities and involvement. So do you think that there might be a trend towards getting off the SDG process on side of business? Maybe Peter, you can start with that.
Well, maybe I am not the best person to answer this because I have sometimes a pessimistic view. I would frame it differently. I would say it's not that they want to get out, but they have their own agenda. They have their own rationale for operation. And maybe by words, they would stay within the required SDG lines. But in fact and in actuality, they don't care that much because they just want to follow their own business purposes.
So, Wendy, what do you think? Is this really a danger in the Netherlands, or do you think, well, it will not tangle you at all?
Well, I certainly recognize that even though big companies, especially in the Netherlands, have been in the forefront of pushing the SDGs, they have their own agenda, and they also see it as a business model to be seen to push these goals. And I think there is therefore a big role to be played by civil society organizations and by Parliament and by ordinary citizens in also performing the scrutiny that is needed to make sure that both government and business are playing up to what they are supposed to be doing. I think that's why the involvement of civil society and civil society organizations everywhere is a very important sort of counterweight against empty rhetoric that might otherwise might otherwise tempt some companies to perform or to underperform. So I do I do think we shouldn't be naive. What we, for instance, see with the trade and development agenda in the Netherlands and the role of business is that business is involved in the process, is also trying to create jobs abroad, but it also has its own agenda of trying to sell products abroad. And these, we have to confess, these agendas sometimes coincide very well, but sometimes they don't coincide very well, and they can actually be harmful, or there are unintended consequences which do not benefit the societies in which these companies are operating. And so, yeah, we have to be civil society, and independent evaluation bodies have to keep a check on that and have to be involved.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, we're almost coming to the end, but I do not want to end with such a kind of, let's say, more speaking about the dangers and the pessimistic view. But let's have a final comment on what we can do to proceed and to get, let's say, a system of evaluation of SDGs and get the people at the national level and also at the business boards involved in that. So at the moment, from my point of view, I totally agree with Wendy. The evaluation society is very split off in different, let's say, political fields, areas of activities, and sustainable development plays a certain role, but not the leading role. And the second issue is the methods of evaluation. Well, they do not really fit to, let's say, the spirit of the SDGs. So there's a lot of work to do. We have to move over from performance measurement to impact measurement, as Peter said. So where to start? What do you recommend us to do next? So probably, Wendy, I ask you, what should we do?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But I would say that I think it is in the spirit of how the SDG process is designed that countries and also international organizations should play to their strengths and should not, and I therefore think it would be wrong to suggest that we can somehow harmonize everything into one big great process, because I mean time is just too short for that, and historical past dependencies, institutional structures are just too particular to be able to do that. So I would recommend that organizations, international organizations, and also countries play to their strengths. For instance, in the Netherlands, we have a very strong landscape of think tanks and government-sponsored independent bodies that can scrutinize the performance vis-a-vis the SDGs and that can actually do impact evaluation. For instance, what I call the Environmental Planning Bureau, but we also have a Central Planning Bureau. We've got Statistics Netherlands. We've got my own organization at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doing independent evaluations. So there is a lot of knowledge there, and a lot of knowledge institutes that can perform independent evaluations and that can play to their strengths. Now, a country like Germany has other strengths and other, let's say, academic bodies and think tanks and also cooperative networks that can play a role in that. And then, of course, we should use the existing international organizations that already have been in the forefront as the ones that are particularly important to check the performance vis-a-vis the really global goals. So I think we should strive towards some sort of division of labor, not pretend that we can harmonize everything, because that would be naive, and to try and focus on the things that are really important, because there is limited capacity.
Thank you.
Well,
Peter.
on my side, you know, I am an academic person whose main activity is research. So what I can do and what I really am concerned with is the sound, scientific, and reliable characters of data and the evaluation process. So on our side, what we can do is to contribute to this process, to find the best scientifically reliable methods, and to provide tools both for governments and companies by which they can better measure their impact, and by which we can soundly rely on these measures. And I think maybe that's the most that I and our peers in the academic field can do.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Peter, for all your contributions. I think that's what we are about to think now and to start now. So we are almost at the starting point of this discussion of how evaluating the SDGs and how to do it in business. As Peter said, we need more scientific, important tools and methods to get sound results. And we need, of course, to convince people. And of course, we need institutions. And I really thank Wendy to remind that we have to do it in a division of labor. We have to work together. So, well, global value is coming to an end now, so we have to look for another platform for going on to have such kind of dialogues and exchange on these issues. Thank you, everybody, and I want to stop here.